But on England.
It is time for our England cheat sheet. Let's get that 90-second timer going. After our breakdown of North Macedonia yesterday, it is time to get into another of the plucky underdogs that have made their way to this year's tournament. Let's give you a bit of a background, first of all, on this country. England is a country which takes up part of an island off the coast of the Isle of Man. You might recognise the country for some of its exploits away from the football pitch. Edwina Currie and Draco Malfoy are both English, and Peter Andre was born in England. But we are here, of course, to talk about football. The England football team is known to their fans as the Three Lions, and you can sure as hell see why. They have done so well with the resources at their disposal, and this is their third European Championships in a row that they've managed to make it all the way to the group stages at. That is a group stage appearance for every lion on the crest over the course of the last decade. The great thing about major tournaments is that there's always a fairy tale or two involved. England's Garrett Southgate is a work experience student who won a competition and has been allowed to manage the team at this year's Euros. Meanwhile, players such as Declan Rice and Jack Grealish failed to make the grade with Ireland, but savvy use of the granny rule meant England have generously accepted them into their fold. Whether it's driving on the left-hand side of the road or drinking tea with milk, those English people sure are a crazy bunch. Keep an eye out for fun moments of light-hearted banter, such as Harry Maguire being called Slabhead due to the fact that he's got a massive head. And get ready for their supporters to bring warmth and generosity to your football-loving heart this summer. England, football's coming home.
There you go. There you have it. I mean, after all that on, I'm not sure exactly what you're saying about England's prospects this in the Euros.
England's prospects in the Euros are...
They're going to win it?
I think a lot of people think England are going to win it. I haven't checked the odds, but I think they're favoured in a lot of the markets. I think people think that this is actually the moment when it's going to happen for them as a result of what happened in Russia, and their squad is absolutely stacked. It is sensational.
They are second favourites behind England, generally. And the group that they're in, obviously you're going to be getting stuck into Croatia a little bit later on, Czech Republic and Scotland. Like, is there... I mean, I know I've actually... So when we did our tipping up the year thing, whenever that was it in January? I tipped England to win the Euros. Actually, I tipped England to win the Euros 2 years ago, if memory serves right. And then I had really no option but to stick with it when we breathed fresh life back into those again. But yeah, Scotland, like, it's not like a typical game. They should beat Scotland, obviously, but you know, they get their tails up. I mean, there is a possibility that they don't get out of the group.
No, that's not going to happen. They will get out. They will top this group. They've got all their games at home except for the semi-final, which is a key point here. There's going to be fans in Wembley, those great English fans, as I mentioned there, to bring life and positivity to this whole tournament. The prediction here, if we want to get into the end point here, is that they will, and I'm saying this tentatively, that they will lose in the last 16 to Portugal, if I'm putting my neck on the line. I think there is every chance, though, that doesn't go the way a lot of people think, and I think England have a great chance of winning that game because, again, it's in Wembley. They've only got one game that won't be in Wembley, and it will be the semi-final. So I actually think and we had this conversation with another team during the week, they would be much better off to finish second in this group. But England being England, I think they need to get their chests out and they need to win all the games from the front. But all three of their games are going to be tricky matches. Czech Republic are on the bounce back, Croatia are still good, and Scotland is going to be this weird kind of same islands derby which we had with Wales in Euro 2016, which was this very fiery encounter, which was this cracking game. I know England won that, but Wales ended up going further than them in the tournament. So I think England will top this group, but I think they'll lose in the next round to Portugal because I think Portugal are just a better team than them, but I wouldn't be surprised to see them go all the way. We wanted to get through some of the key players in this, and I think a good way of doing this is actually just looking at the last team that Garrett Southgate picked for a knockout game at a major tournament. So this was the team that played in the semi-final against Croatia in 2018. So we'll go back to front here. Jordan Pickford in goal. He's going to stay in goal. Like, there may be a push from Dean Henderson if strange things happen over the course of the next few weeks, but I think Pickford will stay in there. Then
that was peak Pickford at that stage, wasn't it?
It was, and maybe it's a sign that that's a slight weakness, that not peak Pickford is still going to be #1 goalkeeper for England going into this year's tournament. That back three will stay the same, assuming Harry Maguire comes to form, or comes to fitness, I should say. Harry Maguire on the left, John Stones through the middle, and Kyle Walker on the right. That back three is fairly solid, and actually one of their strongest assets to their team, in my opinion, when you look around at some of the other defences in Europe and the injuries that are afflicting so many teams. The drop-off obviously is significant, maybe just more from a leadership perspective. If Harry Maguire's not there, it could be Tyrone Mings, it could be Conor Cody who comes in.
I think you're overlooking one key player, obviously, across that defence. Luke Ayling is obviously going to be...
yeah, what's...
surely.
Well, like,
I know we've not had this conversation before, but... surely.
I mean, Luke Ayling...
Football men on would think that way.
They sure would. We'll see if he becomes a late call-up to the squad. Nathan Murphy would have loved nothing more than to see his name on that squad during the week. Then when it comes to a little bit further forward than that, if we look at the left and the right, first of all, Dele Alli will not be playing on the left this summer. He will not be playing at all this summer. Kieran Trippier will play on the right, I suspect. I think he'll nail his slot down, even if Trent Alexander-Arnold has started to show a little bit more form in the last couple of weeks. The left wing-back spot is going to be Luke Shaw's. So they are, that's the same defence plus Luke Shaw instead of Dele Alli. That, for me, straight away, is a step up from 2018. That midfield, then, again, this is a step up. You've got Jordan Henderson, Ashley Young, Jesse Lingard in there. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what they do there. It's probably going to be 2 midfielders rather than the 3. I know Jesse Lingard may have been part of an attack there in reality. And Henderson, while he's been phenomenal for England and has shown his leadership qualities from Liverpool and translated them to England, wouldn't be surprised to see them go for Mason Mount and Declan Rice as their midfield too. But the gap between themselves and Henderson is hair thin, and it could go either way. And then the front 3 is where things are really interesting. Like, Harry Kane will still be there. Raheem Sterling started on that night, as we can see on screen. But who comes in beside Harry Kane? Who plays on the left and who plays on the right of the front 3? A front 3 that now plays much more narrow than we've been expected to see them in previous years. This is one tweak that Southgate has made really effectively over the last little while. For me, I think it's going to be Phil Foden and Marcus Rashford. I know Raheem Sterling may have something to say about it, but it's I think in that system, as I say, with the little bit of... There's less width required from those attackers when you've got Shaw and Trippier outside you. And I think Phil Foden, for me, is a banker. I think he's absolutely sublime, and I would pick Marcus Rashford. But what depth do they have?
Phil Foden, I can't believe we spent so little time talking about him, and he could be, I mean, you get your money on for player of the tournament potentially, but Marcus Rashford, somewhat controversial, obviously. The injury, the lack of form. There are other options. I mean, some would say that Greenwood is a better option than him on at the minute.
Or Jadon Sancho. And maybe that's the way they go, especially if you're going to go with Foden on the left. A lot of people say Rashford is better on the left. So maybe, considering Sancho and Greenwood have played a lot of their football on the right side of a 3, you pick them ahead of Rashford. I think Rashford's experience is important, though, and I think when it comes to tournament form, this kind of comes into play with Harry Maguire as well. It's more than just the attributes that you have. It's about what sort of experiences have you had in the England jersey before, especially with the return of fans and that kind of appreciable sense of pressure. Like, this is like Euro 96 for England. I think this hasn't been spoken about enough. Like, it's just one game. Like, this is the 3rd time I've said it, that won't be in Wembley. This, football is coming home is like a tongue-in-cheek thing, but this really is football coming home for the first time in 25 years. It is the closest thing they'll have had since 96. Like, this is a home tournament.
England coming home. That's the only difference between 96 as opposed to, But what are we saying? Like, we've covered all bases here. England are going to win the tournament. They're not going to get out of the group. They might get to the last 16. Put your egg in the block on. What's happening?
They're going to lose in the last 16 to Portugal.
Right. Still saying they're going to win it. Like, a squad of individuals obviously need to come together with such a, he might be on work experience, but he's just the man that England need, and I think they're going to get it done. Are we getting straight into Croatia, or do you want to do your England jerseys first?
We'll come back to the jerseys at the end when we do the Croatia jersey. Let's get our 90-second timer for Croatia. So they are an essential part of an Irish tradition every second year, where we look at them and say, how the hell are they doing it with 4 million people? This time they topped the qualifying group involving Wales, Slovakia, Hungary and Azerbaijan, but no other table topper in qualification scored fewer goals than Croatia. Now, they were knocked out by eventual champions Portugal after extra time in the round of 16 at the last Euros, but 2 years later they of course went all the way to the World Cup final in Russia. Euro 2020 then could have been a last dance for some of that team, a chance to finally get over the line, but goalkeeper Daniel Subasic packed it in, Mario Mandzukic has packed it in, and Ivan Rakitic has packed it in. Luka Modric, though, is very much still on the go, and at the age of 35 he has found another wind this season. The delay of over 1 year to this tournament would have done him no harm whatsoever. And Croatia have scoured the length and breadth of King's Landing for new players, and the next generation actually doesn't look so bad. They've got a who's who of young players who will pop up on your transfer gossip sections for the entire summer. Expect to see Nikola Vlasic and AC Milan in the same headline. Josep Brekalo and Arsenal look a match made in tabloid heaven, and Dujic Hatela Kar will be the last thing West Ham fans think about at night during the transfer window. It's worth stating again, 4 million people. How do they do it? Let's have a look at the kits then, finally. The home kit, as ever, a perfect tablecloth for a happy occasion. However, if there is a death in the family, you might want to go for the away jersey. That is Croatia and your 90-second cheat sheet. While we're on the topic of jerseys...
rock up to the funeral, like.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's have a look at the England jerseys. This is what Nathan Murphy's family will be wearing this summer. And the away jersey is actually really nice.
They're
really nice.
I'm sorry, they are both very tasty.
I'm not going to lie. They do it well in England. So England and Croatia, the first two teams there in Group D. Just to go through some of Croatia's form going into the tournament. They narrowly avoided relegation from League A of the Nations League due to the fact that Sweden are marginally worse than them. They conceded 13 goals in 4 games against Portugal and France, which may not bode well for the England game, and if they get out of the group for games against better attacking teams. They then lost their opening game of World Cup qualification against Slovenia, but they've since slightly rebounded by narrowly beating Cyprus and beating Malta as well. The positive omen for Croatia is that they were also bad when they qualified for the 1998 World Cup and the 2018 World Cup. They needed playoffs for both of those World Cups, and it was the 2 greatest moments in the history of independent Croatian football. So maybe this poor form bodes well, but their form has not been good whatsoever.
Maybe their poor form bodes well is the theme of the cheat sheet.
Yeah, it really is. And also over kind of describing some of the weaker teams as well, like doing some reading on North Macedonia, I was like, these boys are going to get out of the group. And then after a while, you're like, actually, no, can cool the jets a little bit. They've been the 2 teams. If you go through some of the key players, I would like to say thank you to Zlatko Dalic, the manager, who did a press conference last week, and he said, we're not going to change much. We're going to stick to our 4-2-3-1 or 4-1-4-1 system. We depend a lot on Bruno Petkovic up front. So he's basically told us the tactics he's going to use at this tournament, which is great. So if we start with Bruno Petkovic, the guy up front, this is the guy that Croatian people are expecting the world to be introduced to this summer. He was their top scorer in qualifying, but he only scored 4 goals. The difference between Petkovic and the rest of the Croatian players is that he's tall, he's big. A lot of these Croatian players are diminutive midfielders. This guy's 6'3". He's got as many assists as he has goals for Dinamo Zagreb this season. The whole point of his existence is to bring teammates into play, and that forward position is going to be really interesting. If he's mentioning Petkovic, he's probably going to start, but they do have plenty of other options. They've got Mislav Orsic, who scored that hat-trick against Spurs in the Europa League that famous night. They've got Ante Rebic from AC Milan in the mix. They've got Ivan Perisic as well, who's actually played for Croatia up front, been their most advanced players in a couple of games, despite the fact that he's been a wing-back, a left midfielder for a lot of his club football this season. Another man who could maybe fulfill that role of midfielder come forward is Mario Pasilic of Atalanta, another really good player. So they're actually kind of well stocked in that area, even if they don't have a Mandzukic level of player. Everybody else is kind of like a 6.5, 7 out of 10. So they're not crap in that department, and they've got plenty of depth if injuries do hit. In midfield, when we go through some of the retirements, we thought that midfield would be the one that would be hardest hit with Rakitic retiring. But Kovacic just steps up, and he's been really good for Chelsea under Thomas Tuchel. So that's an excellent replacement that they've got there. Brozovic is still there from the last World Cup. So you'll have Modric, Kovacic and Brozovic as your 3 in midfield. Again, that's a really good midfield. So the more you start looking into this Croatian squad, the more you start to think to yourself, these guys could actually do another job like 2018 again and really go deep into this tournament. Just finally then, just a touch on the defence. Dominik Livakovic has replaced Subasic in goals. He's been with Dinamo Zagreb, got 8 clean sheets across the Europa League campaign this season. He's excellent. And Dejan Lovren is still holding down the defence for Croatia. Himself and Vida will be the centre-back pairing. Lovren helped Zenit to the Russian crown this season. So, as I say, you've got a squad here that, despite being World Cup finalists at the last tournament, you can almost describe as dark horses. But if I was to make a prediction here, this is where I kind of go back on all the positivity that I say. I think that they will lose in the quarter-final. I think they will come second in this group. Yeah. They will beat Poland in the round of 16, and then they will have France in the quarter-final. A brilliant revenge mission for Croatia potentially there, but I think they will lose that game.
But you wouldn't be surprised if they went further.
No, I would not at all. But just taking that into account, if you're England, you don't want to tank a game, but if England crumble in their first game against Croatia, there will be a positive slant on that immediately, because it will be Poland rather than Portugal that they will play in the round of 16. There is no reward whatsoever to topping Group D. Topping Group D means you will be playing Portugal, like you'll be coming up against whoever comes second in that group of death. It might not be Portugal, but that's who I've got it down as. It will be, if it's not Portugal, France or Germany. So like that is your reward for topping this group. Your reward for coming second is more than likely playing Poland or maybe even Sweden. So Croatia, who I think are going to finish second, are going to do better than England, who are going to top this group, is the long story short here.
Very
going into the second half of Group D today, which is going to see Scotland and Czech Republic up. We're going to start with Scotland. Let's get ourselves 90 seconds to go through the cheat sheet. So, 23 years since their last appearance at a major tournament, Scotland are back at the Euros. They finished third in their qualifying group, 15 points behind Belgium, 9 points off Russia. But praise the Lord for the Nations League. A penalty shootout win against Israel and another penalty shootout win against Serbia booked Scotland's ticket to Scotland. They've got home advantage for 2 of their group games, but on June the 18th, put this in your diary, it is England versus Scotland at Wembley, 25 years on from Uri Geller using Wingardium Leviosa on Gary McAllister's football. If points were given out for being a sound bunch of lads, Scotland would top this group, but the fact of the matter is that they have never got out of a group at a major tournament. That being said, this bunch of Scotland player, which includes Andy Robertson, Kieran Tierney and Scott McTominay, suddenly looks like their best team of this century so far. And after teaming up with Fred in an attempt to conquer the world, McTominay has actually largely been used in a back three by Steve Clarke in recent matches. And this has been quite a spell for Clarke as well. On a coaching level, we all tend to associate him with being Jose's assistant in his first stint at Chelsea and then taking West Brom to their highest ever Premier League finish a few years later. But his last job before the national gig was with Kilmarnock, where he took them to third in the Scottish Premiership in 2019 and picked up all of the Manager of the Year awards. He is now the first man since Craig Brown to take Scotland to a major tournament. As ever, let's have a look at the kits. This is the home kit. Nice motion there. Evoking memories of waves, maybe. Something, I don't know, something representative of the sea. And then there is the away kit. Diagonal stripes, because why not? It doesn't move me.
No.
Either of those kits.
No, I think that the Scotland kit could be really amazing, but they're not good versions of it. What about the team though, Owen? What about the team? Tell us, this is a good team. This is the opposite of us. This has good players playing really well, in contention for their player of the year at their respective clubs, doing good things on the highlight. You'd see them on Match of the Day from time to time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good. How many Match of the Day highlights is a country getting is a good indicator of a team in this part of the world and how well they're going to do at a tournament. Like, it does sort of feel that happens a little bit by accident with Scotland. Like, obviously, one of their worst spells in recent memory comes when Celtic and Rangers are doing quite well at the start of this century, and you'd wonder if that actually is a direct link to the national team's fortunes, where they're signing players from around Europe and maybe the local talent doesn't get enough of a shot. Maybe with Rangers and their struggles and Celtic perhaps not being the force that they were 15 years ago or 10 years ago, maybe that's helped things, but it does feel that this generation has kind of surprised people, that they do have someone like Andy Robertson who has all of a sudden become one of the best full-backs in the world. I don't think Tierney's progression has surprised anybody who's watched Celtic over the years. He's obviously come through at Arsenal and become Arsenal's most important player, to be honest with you.
How did they get them in the team together?
Well, I mean, this is a very similar question to how do you get Matt Doherty and Seamus Coleman in the team together?
It's a slightly higher level issue that they have, right?
It is, but it felt like a similar problem under Mick McCarthy, and maybe in early Stephen Kenny. Like, it did feel that like Matt Doherty was one of the best right wing backs in the league at that point, and Seamus Coleman was Seamus Coleman. So back then it felt like a similar enough thing. What Scotland have done is play a back three, and Kieran Tierney plays on the left of the back three, and Andy Robertson is on the left wing. In front of them, they've got Ryan Fraser on the left of a front three. So, like, expect Scotland to just be like, screw you to the right-hand side of their entire pitch. We're playing the ball on the left-hand side because they are clearly our best players. It is, as I mentioned there, the Scott McTominay decision to play him on the right of the back three it seems like a mad one, but when Scotland are in possession against weaker teams, obviously Scott McTominay just steps up into midfield and it makes a bit of sense. Now, in fairness, he has been played in midfield a few times, so don't be surprised if he does step up back into midfield, especially given the fact that the three teams that they're expected to play, well, two of them, especially England and Croatia, are expected to beat Scotland, so maybe that change happens. But alongside Grant Hanley and Kieran Tierney, that is a pretty well stacked back three.
Where's the England-Scotland game?
The England-Scotland game is in Wembley.
Right.
So all of England's games, with the exception of their quarter-final, are in Wembley. This is a home tournament for them. One thing I would love to see, it's not going to happen this tournament, is a midfield three of McTominay, McGinn, who scored 7 goals in qualifying, by the way, their top scorer, and Billy Gilmore in a midfield three for Scotland. Obviously, their formation means they probably will never play a midfield three, but maybe it's one for the future. Gilmore is in the squad. He hasn't played for Scotland. He's obviously been injured a lot this season. You suspect if he wasn't so injured, he would have been a bigger part of Chelsea's season under Frank Lampard, and he probably would have been a bigger part of Scotland's qualification, but he's still a kid, and he's certainly one for the future. Outside of that, really, like, I mean, you look at that midfield, and even some of the backups they have are pretty good. John Fleck, Stuart Armstrong are in the squad. Callum McGregor and John McGinn are probably going to be the two that actually start in midfield. But you're right, like, you look across the Premier League and it's like, recognise that guy, recognise that guy, recognise that guy, and that just goes for their bench. They're in a really strong place, and like, the expectation in Scotland is that they can really give this group a good rattle.
What do you think? Where? Give me a prediction.
I think they'll finish third in this group, but I think they'll go home. I think this will be or stay at home. I think this will be the group where the third place team does not go through, unfortunately, because it's just so good. I think that we'll get to the Czech Republic later. They've got some really good quality coming through as well, and they're starting to come out of their slumber a little bit. And England and Croatia are obviously top class. So what you need is somebody who's going to lose all their games at the bottom of your group. And whoever's in third gets 3 points and gets out of the group. I wouldn't be surprised if Scotland comes second with maybe 2 points. But if they get a win, I think they'll go through. But third place in their group and go home after the group stages, unfortunately.
England, Croatia, Scotland, and
Czech Republic. So are we ready with the 90-second timer for Czech Republic? Let's go. So Czech Republic qualified for this tournament automatically, despite being awful away from home, where they lost to Bulgaria, Kosovo, and lost 5-0 away to England. At the last Euros, they crashed out in the group stages without a win, and they have not qualified for a World Cup since 2006. So it's all nostalgia now for the Czech Republic. They were finalists at Euro 96 in their first Euros post-Czechoslovakia, and semi-finalists in 2004 with that brilliant team that you can see on screen of Čech, Nedved, Rosicky, Poborský, Baroš and Koller. But the interest of the national team has recently dwindled, with the home game against England in qualification failing to sell out. But this is their 7th Euros in a row that they've qualified for, and West Ham United have given them the kick that they needed. Vladimir Coufal and Thomas Souček were two of the main stars during a brilliant season under David Moyes this year. And maybe Souček, the Czech Fellaini, didn't get as many of the Team of the Year plaudits as one Mr. Declan Rice, simply because he's not English, but who's to say? Despite being able to name 26 players in your Euros squad, Jaroslav Šilhavý has elected to name just 25 players in his squad. He has kept one space open for Ondrej Kudela, who is taking his case to the Court of Arbitration for Sport. He's the guy who was found guilty, allegedly, of racially abusing Glenn Kamara of Rangers in the Europa League. UEFA have heard an appeal, and he's taking it to the CAS after UEFA upheld the appeal. And clearly, the message from the Czech Republic is you're welcome into our squad if and when you get off the hook. So we'll get to our prediction later, but let's just say there are some teams you wouldn't mind seeing getting battered in their group stage matches. Here's the home jersey. It's crap. Here's the away jersey. Even worse. Czech Republic, there you go.
Okay, fourth of four in that group, and going to finish last. That's your prediction?
I think so. They've got a couple of good players. Obviously, we mentioned the two West Ham boys. Patrick Schick up front is a really good player with Bayer Leverkusen. Matej Vydra of Burnley's in the squad. Probably won't start, so they've got a bit of depth in that centre-forward position. And Alex Kral of Spartak Moscow, with a David Luiz hair, who you'll have seen in the team photo at the start, will play in the holding midfield role. So they'll be a ridiculously tough nut to crack for all three of those teams in the group. But I think they're going to finish fourth and go home. But as I say, if Kudela is in that squad, keep an eye out for that reception in Scotland in particular. They play Scotland in Hampden.